Hey everyone! Welcome back to Native Speakers. I'm Sarah, and I'm a communications consultant based in London. I've spent the last 8 years helping professionals from all over the world master English for their remote careers.
And I'm Johnny. I'm from California, and I work as a remote team manager for a tech company with employees in 17 different countries. I know firsthand what it takes to communicate effectively when your entire office exists on a screen.
Today, we're diving deep into something incredibly important: how to communicate professionally in English when you're working remotely. Whether you're joining Zoom calls from your home office or collaborating with teams across time zones, this lesson is for you.
Absolutely. We'll be sharing real conversations, practical tips, and the exact phrases you need to sound confident and professional. So grab your notebook and let's get started.
Part 1. Starting your day, email communication. Johnny, let's kick things off with something we both do every single morning: checking emails. When you're working remotely, email becomes your primary communication tool, doesn't it?
Oh, completely. Sarah, I remember when I first started managing remote teams, I made so many mistakes with email tone. I'd write these super casual messages and people would misunderstand my intentions.
That's such a common problem. Without facial expressions and voice tone, emails can be tricky. Let me give you an example. Imagine you need to ask your colleague to revise a report. A bad email might say, "This report has problems. Fix it and send it back."
Ouch, that sounds harsh, even though the person might not mean it that way.
Exactly. Now here's a better version. "Hi, Michael. Thanks so much for putting this report together. I've reviewed it, and I have a few suggestions that might strengthen the analysis. Would you have time to make some revisions? I've highlighted the sections in the attached document. Let me know if you'd like to discuss any of these points over a quick call."
Perfect. You see how Sarah acknowledged the effort first, made a polite request, offered specific guidance, and opened the door for dialogue. That's professional remote communication.
Let me add another layer to this, Johnny. Time zones are crucial in remote emails. If I'm in London and you're in California, that's an 8-hour difference.
Right. So when you send an email, you should be considerate about timing. Here's what I usually write. Hi team, I'm sending this now, but please don't feel pressured to respond until your working hours. I know we're spread across multiple time zones.
That's thoughtful, and it sets a healthy boundary. Another phrase I love is, "This isn't urgent. Please respond when it's convenient for you." It shows respect for your colleagues' schedules.
Let's talk about email openings and closings too, because these really matter in professional settings.
Absolutely. For openings, you can use, "I hope this email finds you well," for formal contexts, or "I hope you're having a great day," for slightly more casual relationships. When you're emailing someone for the first time, try, "I hope you're doing well," or "Thank you for taking the time to read this."
And for closings, best regards is always safe and professional. I also use kind regards or warm regards when I want to sound friendly but still professional.
Looking forward to hearing from you works great when you're expecting a response. And if you're thanking someone, end with, "Thank you for your time and consideration." Part 2. Video call etiquette and language. All right, Johnny, let's move to the bread and butter of remote work: video calls. I probably spend about 4 hours a day on Zoom, Teams, or Google Meet.
Same here, and honestly, video calls require a completely different skill set than in-person meetings. Let's start with technical language. What do you say when you're having connection issues?
Great question. Here's a realistic scenario. Imagine you're in a meeting and your audio cuts out. When you reconnect, you might say, "I apologize, everyone. I had some audio issues on my end. Could someone please recap what I missed?"
Perfect. Notice how Johnny took responsibility by saying, "on my end," rather than blaming the technology. That's important. Here are more technical phrases. "I'm having trouble with my connection," or "could you repeat that? You were breaking up," or "would you mind if I turned off my camera to improve the connection quality?"
Let's also talk about joining meetings late, because it happens to everyone. Last week, I had back-to-back calls and I joined a client meeting 3 minutes late.
What did you say?
I said, "Good morning, everyone. I sincerely apologize for joining late. My previous meeting ran over. I've reviewed the agenda and I'm ready to contribute. Please don't let me interrupt. Continue where you were."
That's textbook professionalism. You apologized without over-explaining, showed you were prepared, and allowed the meeting to continue smoothly. Now, what about when you need to leave early?
I usually give advance notice. At the beginning of the meeting, I'll say, "Just a heads up, I have a hard stop at 2:30 p.m. today, so I'll need to leave 15 minutes before the scheduled end time. If there's anything you need from me, please bring it up in the first half of the meeting."
Excellent. The phrase hard stop is really common in business English. It means you have another commitment that you absolutely cannot miss. Let's role play a typical meeting scenario, Sarah. I'll be a project manager and you're a team member. We're discussing a project deadline. Good morning, Sarah. Thanks for joining today's stand-up. I wanted to touch base about the website redesign project. Where are we on the timeline?
Good morning, Johnny. Thanks for checking in. We're making solid progress. The design mock-ups are complete, and we're currently in the development phase. However, I want to flag a potential issue. We might need an additional week for user testing to ensure quality.
I appreciate you bringing that up proactively. Quality is definitely our priority. Could you elaborate on what specific aspects of the testing might take longer?
Certainly. We initially planned for 3 days of testing, but given the complexity of the new features, our QA team recommends 5 days. This would allow us to test across multiple devices and browsers thoroughly.
That makes sense. Let's do this. Can you send me a revised timeline by the end of day today? We'll review it and adjust our launch date accordingly. Better to get it right than to rush and face issues post-launch.
Absolutely. I'll have that to you by 5 p.m. today. I'll also include some mitigation strategies to minimize the delay's impact on other dependent projects.
Perfect. I appreciate your diligence on this, Sarah. Anything else we need to discuss while we're here?
Okay, let's pause there. Did everyone notice the professional language we used? Phrases like touch base, flag a potential issue, elaborate on, and mitigation strategies. These are all common in business English.
Part 3. Giving and receiving feedback remotely. Now, let's tackle something that many people find challenging: giving feedback when you can't sit down with someone face to face.
This is so important. Remote feedback requires extra care because you can't read body language as easily. The key is to be clear, specific, and constructive. Let me show you an example of poor feedback first. Your presentation wasn't good. Do better next time.
Yikes, that's vague and demotivating. The person doesn't know what to improve.
Exactly. Now here's how I would approach it. Hi, David. I wanted to share some thoughts on yesterday's client presentation. Overall, you demonstrated strong product knowledge, which the client really appreciated. For future presentations, I'd suggest slowing down your speaking pace. There were a few moments where information came very quickly, and I noticed the client seemed a bit overwhelmed. Also, incorporating more visual aids might help illustrate those complex technical concepts. What do you think? I'm happy to brainstorm strategies together.
That's fantastic. You started with positive feedback, gave specific areas for improvement, and invited dialogue. That's what we call the sandwich method: positive, constructive, positive.
Though I should mention, some people find the sandwich method too formulaic. The key is genuine, balanced feedback. Johnny, how do you handle giving difficult feedback remotely?
I always schedule a video call for sensitive feedback, never email or instant message. Last month, I had to address performance issues with a team member named Carlos. Here's how that conversation went. Carlos, thanks for making time for this call. I wanted to discuss the marketing campaign project and talk through some challenges we've been experiencing. First, I want to acknowledge the creative ideas you've brought to the table. Your social media strategy was particularly innovative.
Thank you, Johnny. I've been trying to think outside the box.
You definitely have been. However, I've noticed that the last 3 deadlines for deliverables were missed by several days. This has created some bottlenecks for the design team who depend on your content. Can you help me understand what's been happening?
Honestly, I've been struggling with workload management. I didn't realize the delays were affecting others so significantly.
I understand. Workload can be challenging, especially in a remote environment where it's harder to gauge everyone's capacity. Let's work together on a solution. Would it help to have weekly check-ins where we review your priorities? We could also explore whether some tasks could be delegated or deadlines adjusted.
Okay, stopping there. Notice how Johnny approached this? He was direct, but empathetic, asked for the employee's perspective, and immediately moved toward collaborative problem solving.
Exactly. Now, what about receiving feedback, Sarah? That's equally important.
Great point. When someone gives you feedback, avoid getting defensive. Here are some professional responses. Thank you for that feedback. I really appreciate you taking the time to share this with me. Or, that's helpful insight. I hadn't considered it from that angle.
And if you need clarification, say, could you give me a specific example so I can better understand? Or what would success look like in this area? Part 4, Collaborative Language and Team Dynamics.
Johnny, let's talk about collaboration because remote work requires intentional collaboration. It doesn't happen organically like it might in an office.
So true. You can't just tap someone on the shoulder or overhear a conversation that sparks ideas. You have to create those opportunities deliberately.
Here are some phrases that encourage collaboration. I'd love to get your input on this. What's your take on this approach? Or, I think your expertise in this area would be valuable.
I use those all the time. Another one I love is, let's put our heads together on this. It's slightly informal, but creates a sense of teamwork.
When you're brainstorming remotely, you need to be more explicit about inviting participation. Instead of waiting for silence, actively call on people. Marcus, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Or, Jennifer, from the legal perspective, how does this look?
Absolutely. And because remote meetings can sometimes have awkward silences due to lag or people not wanting to interrupt, I often say, I'm going to pause here for thoughts and questions. Please feel free to unmute or use the chat function.
That's great because it gives people multiple ways to contribute. Some people are more comfortable typing than speaking up.
Let's role-play a brainstorming session. Sarah, imagine we're trying to come up with ideas for improving team morale in our remote company.
Thanks for organizing this brainstorming session, Johnny. I think team morale is really important, especially when we're all working from different locations.
I agree completely. I've been noticing that people seem a bit disconnected lately. Let's throw out some ideas. Remember, there are no bad ideas in brainstorming. Who wants to start us off?
I'll jump in. What if we implemented virtual coffee breaks? Just 15 minutes each week where we hop on a call with no agenda, just to chat casually like we would in an office break room.
I like that. Building on your idea, we could make them optional and have different time slots to accommodate various time zones. What else? Any other thoughts?
Another idea, we could create interest-based Slack channels, like a book club channel, a fitness challenge channel, or a cooking channel. It would help people connect over shared interests beyond work.
That's excellent. It creates community naturally. Let me add to that. What if we had a monthly show and tell meeting where someone shares a hobby or skill? Last month at another company I heard about, someone taught the team basic photography skills.
I love that. It humanizes everyone and gives us glimpses into each other's lives. Oh, and here's another thought. We could implement Recognition Fridays, where people share appreciations for their colleagues in a dedicated Slack channel.
Notice how we built on each other's ideas there? That's collaborative language in action. Phrases like building on your idea, let me add to that, and that's excellent show active listening and teamwork.
Part 5. Handling difficult conversations. Now, let's address something many people find stressful: difficult conversations in a remote setting.
These are challenging enough in person, but when you're doing it over video, it requires extra skill.
Exactly. Whether you're disagreeing with a colleague, addressing a conflict, or delivering disappointing news, the language you use matters enormously.
Let me share a real situation I faced. I had to tell my team that a major project they'd worked on for months was being canceled due to budget cuts. This was a video call I was dreading.
How did you approach it?
I started by being direct and honest. I said, "Team, I need to share some difficult news, and I want to be transparent with you. The leadership team has decided to cancel the Aurora project due to unexpected budget constraints. I know this is disappointing. You've all invested tremendous effort into this."
You led with honesty. That's crucial.
Then I acknowledged their feelings. I want to recognize that this feels frustrating, and you might be feeling confused or upset. Those feelings are completely valid. I felt the same way when I heard the news.
Validating emotions is so important, especially remotely, where people might feel isolated in their reactions.
Absolutely. Then I moved to the next steps. Here's what happens next. First, we'll have a transition meeting tomorrow where I'll answer any questions you have. Second, I'm working with HR to ensure that your contributions to this project are documented and recognized in your performance reviews. Third, we're going to discuss how to apply what you've learned to upcoming projects.
That's really well handled. You gave clear information, showed you cared about their efforts, and provided a path forward.
Thanks. Now, what about when you disagree with someone in a meeting? That requires diplomacy.
Great question. Instead of saying "you're wrong" or "I disagree," use softer language. Try "I see your point and I'd like to offer a different perspective," or "that's one way to look at it. Have we considered alternative approaches?"
I often use, "I wonder if we might also think about," or "playing devil's advocate for a moment."
Those are excellent. Let's practice a disagreement scenario. Johnny, you propose we should launch a product immediately. I think we should wait.
Based on our market research, I believe we should launch the product next month. The competition is heating up, and we can't afford to wait.
I appreciate your sense of urgency, Johnny, and you're absolutely right that competition is a factor we need to consider seriously. I'd like to propose an alternative timeline, though. If we wait an additional 6 weeks, we could incorporate the user feedback from our beta testing, which might prevent costly post-launch fixes. What if we explored a middle ground, perhaps a soft launch to a limited audience while we refine based on feedback?
That's a fair point, Sarah. I hadn't fully considered the beta feedback timeline. Could you elaborate on what specific feedback you're most concerned about addressing?
See what happened there? I validated Johnny's concern first, presented my perspective with reasoning, and offered a compromise. Johnny then asked for more information rather than shutting down the idea. Part 6. Cultural sensitivity in global teams.
Sarah, one thing we haven't touched on yet is cultural sensitivity. When you're working remotely with people from different countries, this becomes really important.
Absolutely critical. I work with people from Japan, Brazil, Germany, India, and many other countries. Communication styles vary dramatically across cultures.
Can you give us some examples?
Sure. For example, in some cultures, direct communication is valued. For example, Dutch or German colleagues might be very straightforward. They might say, "This approach won't work," without softening language.
Whereas in other cultures, like many Asian countries, indirect communication is more common to preserve harmony and avoid confrontation.
Exactly. So if you're working with someone from Japan, instead of saying no directly, they might say, "That might be difficult," or "We'll consider it carefully."
Understanding these differences prevents misunderstandings. I remember working with a colleague from India who would often say, "I'll try," when I asked if something could be done by a deadline. I initially thought it meant uncertainty, but I learned it was a polite way of saying, "Yes, I'll do it."
That's a perfect example. Here's my advice. When working across cultures, ask clarifying questions. Just to make sure I understand correctly, you're planning to have this completed by Friday, right?
Also, be patient with language barriers. Not everyone speaks English as their first language, and some people might need extra time to process or respond.
If someone seems to be struggling with English, you can
Part 7. Managing your presence and personal brand.
Let's wrap up with something that often gets overlooked: managing your professional presence remotely.
Yes, when you're remote, people form impressions of you based solely on your digital interactions. Every